SpotLight on Ayckbourn, The Family Plays, written and narrated by Alan Ayckbourn's Archivist, Simon Murgatroyd. One of the most significant yet frequently ignored strands of Alan Ayckbourn's writing is what he dubs his family plays. Written between 1988 and 2004, these plays are an essential part of the playwright's canon and one the author treats as seriously as his adult work, drawing little distinction between these strands of his writing. Indeed, within the official canon, there is no distinction drawn. The family plays are just considered part of the extensive full-length play canon and not labelled any differently. But what do we mean by the family plays? At its most basic, these are plays intended to be enjoyed by the whole family, but that doesn't mean they are children's plays. If an adult play is one that adults can bring young people to which they too can appreciate, then the family plays are the ones that young people can bring adults to which they too can enjoy and appreciate. The motivation to begin writing the family plays illustrates this point as, by the mid-1980s, Alan was noticing a trend at his home theatre, the Stephen Joseph Theatre in the Round in Scarborough, and this is what he said. Children sat quite happily watching the adult plays. I began to see that you don't have to throw your brain out of the window when you write for children. You just use a different set of muscles. More and more parents began to bring children to my adult plays, so I realised you could still write about issues for a younger audience. This then led to the realisation that young people at the time were also being ill-served with regard to theatre, as the playwright notes here. After 30 years writing exclusively for adults, it was only in 1988 that I began to seriously consider the prospect of creating something specifically for a younger audience. I sensed a gap at the time that I felt badly needed addressing, namely that there was precious little serious theatre writing being done for children, either for them to watch or perform. Apart from any other consideration, I became conscious too, as the long-serving artistic director of a regional company, that as a result of this neglect, we were actively discouraging our future audience. Alan determined to rectify this. In the winter of 1988, having just returned from a 2-year sabbatical at the National Theatre, he wrote his first family play, Mr. A's Amazing Maze Plays, keen to emphasise what is unique to theatre, the live experience. For his first family play, Alan wanted young people, possibly coming to the theatre for the first time, to experience what it was that makes theatre so special, why it offered a different experience to television, computers or cinemas. And this was the live experience. To this end, he created a second act that put the play firmly in the hands of the audience. In Mr. A's Amazing Maze Plays, young Susie finds her mysterious neighbour, Mr. Acousticus, despises noise, having stolen her dog's bark. In the second act, she ventures into his labyrinth of a mansion, determined to find the bark and the other stolen sounds. In this, she is guided by the audience, who choose her path through the mansion and then have to remember, in reverse, how to get her back out. This emphasised the liveness of theatre and proved to be a hit with audiences. Into this, he also wove a story which lay many of the thematic ideas that he would return to in his family plays in the future, such as parental loss, taking responsibility, and the hero's quest, all whilst determined to neither patronise nor condescend to his target audience. I think I write from the adult's perspective. I don't try to become a child. I try and imagine what I as a child would have enjoyed and what my children would have enjoyed. I think that it is better to write above them than below them, so that they have to reach a little. The lessons Alan learnt from writing and seeing Mr. A's Amazing Maze Plays performed in front of families helped him define the mythology he would bring to all his writing for young people, as this quote shows. You have to be more aware. Children won't lie to you. They judge you immediately. They can get bored very quickly. Adults are polite people normally, and if something is a little boring, they'll sit and watch it and think, well, it'll get more interesting in a minute. But children just go, boring, and turn around and talk to their friends. All the things that matter in any sort of theatre matter twice as much for children. Good story, good dialogue, characters you are interested in. What Alan also realised was, typically, productions for young people were treated as an afterthought. When he went to the National Theatre with his second family play, Invisible Friends, he was disappointed to hear it had been given half the budget of one of his adult productions. This did not sit well, and he argued that if theatres were to engage with young audiences, they had to give the work the same weight. He insisted his family plays should have equal, if not higher budgets. Certainly at his home theatre, productions of his family plays were never skimped on and often had higher budgets than other shows in the rep. Invisible Friends followed in 1989 and again emphasised the spectacle of live theatre with magical effects such as a bedroom tidying itself. One mustn't forget the vast majority of Alan Ayckbourn's plays are conceived for theatre in the round. As audiences surround the action and are virtually on the stage, illusions are harder to pull off as the stage is in clear and full view of the entire audience. But Alan also knew full well that this also made the plays even more magical if an audience genuinely believed in what they saw. Invisible Friends also took a step forward in that it took the themes and some of the moral dilemmas of an adult work and essentially created a young person's version of the play. This occurs frequently in his play canon, with a family play often complementing an adult one. In the case of Invisible Friends, it is often described as a companion piece to Woman in Mind. However, the playwright notes there is one significant difference in the writing. It's fair enough to leave adults in a dark cupboard. They can find their way out. But I have this touching faith that if you say to a group of children, this can't be done, they might believe you, when there might be a potential Einstein out there who will find the path to the stars. So the family plays are marked by an optimism, which isn't to say they back away from darkness or moral dilemmas. Whilst the path is often a difficult one for the protagonists, the outcomes are generally optimistic. The reception to both these plays bolstered Alan's confidence in his writing, and he began to experiment with concepts of characters, time and space with This Is Where We Came In and My Very Own Story, a point he is quick to acknowledge. It was about now that I began to stop concerning myself about what limits I should observe in children's writing and concentrated on how far I could take it. These plays also signalled the point when Alan realised the larger challenge was creating something that would satisfy the entire family, that essentially the line between the family and the adult plays was increasingly blurring. By My Very Own Story, says the playwright, I'm barely dealing with anything I wouldn't be dealing with in an adult play. The whole thing has become adult plays edited very slightly. They are not really children plays at all. They're family plays, because I began to see very clearly that what was really fascinating was not a children's audience, but an audience in which parents could bring their children. Parents could enjoy the play as well. The children could enjoy the play equally, maybe on slightly different levels occasionally, but generally much the same, but enjoy it in the company of their parents, which seemed to me very positive and much more satisfying. He also began to draw upon his own influences and inspirations. Alan, as a child and young man, had been obsessed with film and the golden age of science fiction writing. Callisto 5, later revised as Callisto 7, is, to all intents and purposes, a stage version of the movie Alien, which also tapped into the increasing popularity of video gaming. The champion of Parabenu drew on the fairy tale and adventure stories of his youth and was enthusiastically described by the Financial Times as Star Wars meets the Arabian Nights. This epic adventure draws on science fiction and fantasy influences, from flying carpets to malfunctioning automatons, dark magic to thrilling sword fights. It also posed some serious moral questions about the decisions we make and their consequences. This was as a result of observing what young people were enjoying most about his plays, as the playwright noted. I think there's a mistaken belief that children go to the theatre to laugh and nothing else. They have a bigger appetite than that. My first plays were quite light, but as I've grown darker, I've noticed children get more involved. In 1998, Alan wrote The Boy Who Fell Into a Book to tie in with the National Year of Reading. It promoted the joys of reading, with a young hero drawn into the books on his shelf alongside a hard-boiled detective. If previous plays had been inspired by some of his adult work, this was the first play to inspire an adult one, with Improbable Fiction 7 years later, which featured characters moving between different literary genres. In 2000, Alan teamed up with the composer Dennis King and united his interests of writing for young people with musicals in an ambitious time-travelling play drawing on influences from The Time Machine to The Wizard of Oz, Doctor Who to Star Wars. Whenever is not a throwaway musical for young people. It begins with a recognisable theme of bullying before going on to encompass cataclysmic war, the fall of humanity, the creation of the universe, and the responsibilities we have to ourselves and the world. Here's what Alan said. I suppose there's a bit of a retelling of Communicating Doors. Whenever has a slightly pessimistic view of a possible future where we need to talk to each other more. In a way, the play is a moral lesson about thinking about the future now and not leaving it till it's too late. Whenever prepared the way for Alan's most ambitious family play, Orvin, Champion of Champions. Dennis King again composed a full-length musical which featured the largest cast ever to appear in an Ayckbourn play. A theatrical extravaganza commissioned by the National Youth Music Theatre, it has a cast of more than 40, and the world premiere production took over the main house of the Stephen Joseph Theatre at the height of the summer. A stronger statement of intent towards drama for young people you are not likely to find. Alan's final two family plays came in 2003 and 2004 with My Sister Sadie and Miss Yesterday. They introduced slightly older teenage protagonists into the mix with an increasing willingness to throw complex and mature issues at its audience. By this stage, the playwright felt very comfortable with this and noted, "The trick with writing for children is understanding they like a very strong plot and for a story to be quite scary. When you look at all the great children's writers, from Roald Dahl to Philip Pullman, there's always a dark element." My Sister Sadie deals with issues such as weapons of mass destruction, misuse of technology, and sibling loss. Whilst Miss Yesterday offers the heroine a chance to step back in time to save her brother from a fatal accident, but in doing so, threatens the whole of humanity's existence from a ravaging cancer, leading to a heartbreaking moral decision for Tamara, the heroine. And it is here that the playwright admits there is essentially no line to be drawn, that what all audiences demand from good theatre is essentially the same. The secret to writing successfully for young people is much the same as writing for adults. I have progressed as I have written for this audience. I've deepened and broadened it from quite a simple storybook with a bit of danger and always with a safety net. More recently, I've been fascinated to see how far I can push it, and as long as you give them characters to associate with or identify with, they're not worried about getting the jokes. They want to be involved, and sometimes they want to be moved, and that's what theatre has over other art forms. Which all points to why Alan Ayckbourn's family plays should not be ignored when looking at his entire body of work. Ultimately, there is little difference between them and his adult writing. The themes are frequently strikingly similar, and the ideas just as inventive and thrilling, if not more so. Indeed, when it comes to considering the family plays, one has to accept they have irrevocably affected his entire subsequent output. For they gave him the confidence to introduce more fantastical elements into all of his writing, and the playwright is adamant that since 1988, the vast majority of work has been coloured by his writing for young people. To write for such an audience sharpens your playwriting skills no end. It's affected my adult work, I know. Writing for young people makes you feel a bit more daring. You can depart from the curse of realism. I'd never have written many of my later plays if I hadn't experienced the thrills and spills of writing for the younger audience.